Hi, today from Stockholm, Sweden. Today we'll be talking about the history of central banking and why central banking always ends up in unlimited money printing. I will give you an example of the oldest central bank in the world, the Swedish Riksbank. See you in the next part. Central banking and unlimited money printing. The Swedish Riksbank is the oldest central bank in the world that is still in operation. This building behind me was generally the first building of the official Riksbank. As you know, before that, Stockholm Banco existed. This was the first state bank that failed, and it existed since 1657. But since it failed, a new bank was established in 1668. It was practically the same bank because the new bank took over the assets of the old bank, of Palmstruch bank or Stockholm Banco, and the main officers and main employees of the bank were the same people. So this was generally the same bank, but for historical reasons or for political reasons, this bank was renamed, and also there were slight changes to the bank. The history of Palmstruch Bank and how it came about and what happened, why it ended up in inflation and money destruction, you will find out about in my earlier film that I will put a link below this video. Watch this film because it's also very instructional. But then a new state bank in Sweden was created, and it was called the Bank of the Estates of the Realm. There were 4 estates in the Swedish realm: the nobility, the clergy, the burghers, and the peasants. And so it was kind of a parliament, and this was a controlling body in the states, constitutional body that also somehow kept in control the king and other state institutions. And one of the state institutions was the bank. And the bank was the old bank before this Swedish state bank, that the new established Swedish state bank in 1668. The old bank, Stockholm Banco, was somehow instrumentalized politically. So the estates of the realm, the Swedish parliament, so to say, wanted to make sure it won't be misused, it won't be instrumentalized politically. Somehow they wanted to make sure it won't be corrupted by the politics, especially by the king and by the nobility. So that's why they inserted several controls in the new bank. That was at the beginning called the Bank of the Estates of the Realm, and later it was renamed, 200 years later, it was renamed Riksbank or Sveriges Riksbank, meaning the Bank of Sweden generally. And a new building was erected for this bank, and this is the building that was erected in 1680 for the new bank, and the bank operated here in over 20 years long from this building. And the changes they introduced were, of course, a lot of security controls. For example, for the withdrawals, there were needed 3 signatures. A commissioner needed to put a signature there, and also, of course, the bank director, stuff like that. But the most significant change was the new bank wasn't allowed to issue credit notes. It was a form of banknotes that you will learn about in the previous video in this series. Palmstruch Bank, a predecessor bank, was using these credit notes, and it was identified as one of the reasons for its failing, for the destruction of money. So the new bank wasn't allowed to do that in 1668 when it was created. But let's say 35 years later, people started to find out workarounds to use paper money anyway. How did it work? It worked pretty easy, because if you wanted to withdraw money from the bank, you put a request of withdrawal, right? You wrote a request of withdrawal, and you went to the bank with that request, with that withdrawal note, and they checked it if you had the amount of money in your bank account. Then if you had, they deducted the amount of money from your bank account, and they gave you a payment order that you needed to go to the cashiers, to the tellers, and give it to them to receive cash for that. So you got so to say, a payment order nominated in the amount of money that you wanted to withdraw. And it was signed by these 2 or 3 people, bank officials. And of course, you were supposed to go to the cashiers and use that payment order to withdraw your cash. But since cash in Sweden was really cumbersome, because they were using copper money, and they were using these dollars or thalers, they called it dollars, and these dollars were really heavy. They were generally copper plates, and you needed a lot of copper plates for big transactions, whatever. So it was really cumbersome to really practically use these copper plates as money, and people wanted to use paper money because they learned to value the paper money that the predecessor bank, the Palmstruch bank or Stockholm Banco, created and offered, and now this paper money was forbidden. So what they did, people who had bank accounts, they created different withdrawal requests, like $5, $10, $25, $100 withdrawal requests, got payment orders for these withdrawals, meaning they were notes on paper ordering the cashier to pay out the amount of money. So they had these pieces of paper, the payment orders, and they started to use these payment orders as paper money. These payment orders started to circulate in Stockholm as paper money. After a while, people started to counterfeit these payment orders, and many counterfeited notes were in circulation. And the central bank, the Riksbank, realized they need to print their own notes on an unforgeable paper, on their own paper, so it was really difficult to forge them. So they bought a paper mill, and they were manufacturing their own paper and then printing the banknotes, their own banknotes on their own paper. So it was really difficult to forge them, to counterfeit them. But the Estates of the Realm, the Swedish parliament, wanted to create more competition in the banking sector. So they allowed also printing banknotes, creating money generally, to commercial banks. But all the banks had the restriction. Of course, the banknotes needed to be backed 100% by metal in the bank, by gold or by silver or by copper. And they were convertible, meaning if you were in a possession of a banknote, you could go to the bank and get an equal amount of coins as the nominal on the banknote. What happened later? Over 200 years later, in 1897, Riksbank became a central bank. It wasn't the first central bank, but it is the oldest central bank. It means that Riksbank existed as a bank before all other banks that became central banks in the world. And what does it mean that Riksbank became a central bank? It means Riksbank became a monopolist in money printing. They got the exclusive right to print money in Sweden. So the justification for it was that printing money is a very profitable business, and this business should benefit the full nation, the full society. So the profits from this business should go to the state and not to the private banks. And that's when private banks were prohibited to issue banknotes, generally to print money. And only Riksbank was allowed to do that. And of course, printing money means inflation. And of course, printing money means also problems in solvency of the banks. So not very long later, the convertibility of Swedish banknotes was temporarily suspended. In 1931, the Swedish parliament decided that the Swedish banknotes be no longer redeemable for metal coins, for silver, for gold, and it was set temporarily to save the liquidity of the bank. But of course it was prolonged year by year until 1975, where it was written in the constitution that Swedish money is no longer backed by anything. Coming to more recent times, this is the new building of Central Bank of Sweden, of Sveriges Riksbank. And 1968, for the 300th anniversary of existence of the Riksbank, the bank funded a special prize for special achievements in economic sciences in memory of Alfred Nobel. And this prize is handed out annually together with the Nobel Prizes in the City Hall in Stockholm here. And in the mainstream they call it the Nobel Prize for Economics. But this is not a Nobel Prize. This is not one of the prizes that Alfred Nobel funded for special achievements in different sciences. This is a prize funded by the Central Bank of Sweden in memory of Alfred Nobel, in case you don't know that. Next time you will be wiser. And in recent times, Sweden again became very innovative as to money creation and multiplying money into infinity. As you know, there were several achievements, several discoveries that Swedish or that were made in Sweden as to money creation. For the first time, they connected the deposit bank with credit bank. For the first time, they created paper money in Europe here, and also they have the oldest central bank in the world. And in 21st century, they again became extremely innovative as to money creation, as to multiplying money into infinity. In 2009, Sveriges Riksbank introduced negative deposit rates, meaning it costed money for commercial banks to deposit money in the central bank. Before that, negative interest rates were considered impossible in banks, but Sweden proved them possible. And not only the deposit rate since 2009 till today never became positive again in Sweden, but some of the other interest rates have fallen below zero as well, like the repo rate and other rates. What is the consequence of negative interest rates? Of course, it is money spending and money creation. If you have negative interest rates, money becomes extremely cheap. It is actually, if you take a loan at the bank, you have to pay back less than you have taken. So it is extremely attractive to take out loans, and loans mean always money creation. And also, if you have negative interest rates for deposits, it means it doesn't make sense to save money. You are stimulated actually to spend money. So it is about stimulating economy and about creating more and more money with apparently no backing. And if you have negative interest rates, people of course don't want to keep their money in banks because it doesn't make sense. They have to pay for that. So they prefer to keep money as cash. And in order to take out the cash, Sweden for many years already has been convincing its citizens to use digital money, to use cards, card payments, and not use cash. And indeed it is difficult to use cash in Sweden. In some restaurants, in many restaurants actually, in most restaurants, in many stores, you can't use cash. They accept only card payments. They accept only electronic payments. And the next step from that is to eliminate cash altogether, right? In order to make it impossible for people to flee from the financial system, to take the money out of the system. So in 2016, Sweden and Riksbank, Swedish Riksbank, was the first bank, the first country to research central bank cryptocurrencies, CBCDs. 2016, they started a research into the topic of viability and doability of introducing a cryptocurrency as a state money, as electronic money for everybody, and of course obliterating and removing cash from the society. And since Sweden has its own currency and it is independent from issuing money from euro and from European institutions, it is easier for Sweden apparently to issue their own digital cryptocurrency that is called e-krona. So they issued 2 reports since then, and both reports stated generally that it is doable, it is possible to create such a currency. It could be done. It is just a question of political decision to do it. And I suppose Sweden will be, if not the first country, so probably one of the first countries in Europe to introduce central bank digital currency in the world. So as you see, Sweden has always been and still is very innovative as to money creation and creating money into infinity. That's it for today. If you like this video, give me a thumb up. If not, of course, thumb down. Subscribe if you haven't. Share this video with your loved ones, with your friends. One day they will thank you for that. I talk here a lot about money, about economy, about business, about doing great, impossible things in your life and business. I talk here a lot about how the best entrepreneurs in our world think and act, how the self-made billionaires think and act. So if you like this video, you will certainly like my other videos. I invite you to watch them. That's it for today from Stockholm, Sweden. I wish you a fantastic day. Let's do something extraordinary today.